Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
What is up, Jerrod?
How are you, Mr. Ali? You got a little starfish shirt going on?
Dude, you can call me Patrick from SpongeBob today, man.
Dude, I don't know that I ever thought I'd call you Patrick.
Dude,
I do love SpongeBob.
It was a great show. I used to watch a lot of SpongeBob.
Dude, my kids were little when SpongeBob was really popular, and we used to take naps to it. Yeah, but now I see parents nowadays don't let their kids watch SpongeBob.
Really?
Yeah, I had some parents the other day like, no, we don't let our kids watch SpongeBob. And I was like, shit, man, my kids, we used to run around the house quoting SpongeBob.
That's funny. Man, so I just showed, Courtney didn't know who Hulk Hogan was. I know, right?
Saddest day ever.
Dude, so I had to reintroduce her to like my childhood, right? And I was
she
like,
had
okay,
no wrestling action figures as a girl?
None of that. Like her brother didn't like that. Her dad didn't like that. And I was like, this is what I grew up on. Like when Stone Cold Steve Austin would beat The Rock, I would cry. If like Sting from the NWO Wolfpack would lose to anyone else, I would cry. Like that was my livelihood. I had all the action figures. I even went to, it wasn't a WrestleMania, but it was one of their like big ones. As like a 5-year-old, I had my whole face painted. I was super into that stuff. And I was like, okay, time out. Like I gotta pull up some old 90s like wrestling stuff. Like you got to see the Undertaker's walk out, like all this stuff. And she was watching and she's like, oh my God, this makes so much sense as to who you are now, like as a person.
You're a WWE character.
I guess so, man.
Dude, I used to go to it live. That was like, they used to have a big one in Washington, D.C. on Christmas night. I forget what they called it. But it was live on national television, and that was one of our Christmas presents a couple years in a row. We went and watched it live. And we saw like Macho Man and Andre the Giant and Hogan. Yeah, dude, we used to be huge into that. Dude, I used to have my own cage matches at the playground inside that little dome thing that you climb on. It's a bunch of triangles. We used to have cage matches in there.
Nice. Yeah, I had Royal Rumbles in the little sand playground as well.
Oh, yeah, dude, we were wrestling all the time.
It was the best.
Courtney doesn't know any of that.
She was like, I think I've heard the name Hulk Hogan, but I was like, what? Okay, we gotta.
She probably knew him from like the reality show or something.
Yeah, she's like, I know who The Rock is, and like I've heard of this Stone Austin guy. I was just like, oh my God, we gotta.
Well, she's good in yoga and tapping human potential, but we gotta update her on all things wrestling.
Yeah, I told her we need to just spend a whole Sunday just watching 90s wrestling.
Who was your all-time favorite wrestler?
Sting.
Oh, Sting, yeah.
I don't know why I liked him
because he had his face painted. He was mysterious. He was a good guy, then he was a bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Sting and The Rock. I love The Rock a lot.
I loved Jimmy Superfly Snuka. He might have been before your time.
Yeah, I know who he is though.
Because we used to get wrestling Saturday mornings and Sunday mornings on TV, and I remember there was a Saturday morning I was watching, and Rowdy Piper hit him with a coconut and smashed him with bananas and stuff, and I was so sad.
Dude, it was emotional.
Oh man, it used to play with your heartstrings.
Man, it really, so as I was showing Courtney, it really made me inspired to learn a little bit more about Vince McMahon. I was like, dude, this guy's a genius, man. Dude. Like, he was so good with like, it was more than just wrestling. It was like theater and drama and the backstories and just so much going on with that.
Well, I mean, and today he still is. I don't know if you saw that maybe a month or two ago, John Cena came out and did this apology in Mandarin Chinese language fluently because he inadvertently offended Chinese people somehow. And but he spoke it fluently. So then the people investigating, basically Vince McMahon paid for John Cena and a couple other high-level people to get fluently trained in Chinese because of the market shares over there.
Whoa. Dude, it's crazy. Yeah, like I remember being in Lebanon, in the streets of like Sidon, Beirut, Lebanon, is always like these WWE wrestlers, like like professional wrestling is so huge in the Middle East. They love those guys.
Well, dude, amateur wrestling in the Middle East is one of the most popular sports. Like the most
Crazy.
popular athletes in Iran are the wrestlers.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Here in
Yeah.
America, we barely get people in the arena to watch wrestling.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Well, not fake wrestling, but like legit wrestling. Like in Iran, like
gotcha.
the legit Olympic wrestlers are like their most popular sports figures.
Yeah, here in the US, we like pro wrestling more than real wrestling.
Yeah, we'll see.
Funny.
Well, it's good, man. That's a good segue for this week, Ollie, because we're going to talk about how to handle conflict. And what better way to settle some conflict than a good old cage match at your local playground.
Amen. With steel chairs.
Oh, dude, we used to love it. I swore for a long time it was real, though.
Me too. I didn't want to accept that it was fake. I was like, nah.
I hope our community didn't just tune out there that we actually believed in pro wrestling when we were kids, but we loved it, man.
Yeah. So, episode 124, how to handle conflict.
That's interesting. We are in a world that revolves around conflict. Yet, for many of us, we'll spend all day, every day trying to avoid conflict at any cost. To include the sorry epidemic that we did. I don't know what show that was, remember? Where everybody like apologizes nonstop for stuff they're not even sorry for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, first of all, Jerrod, how would you even define conflict? Like, what is a conflict?
Opposing forces. That's it. Simple, right? It's opposing forces. It's just the opposite of whatever it is you're trying to do or achieve or believe or say or think. It's the opposite of it.
Do you have any recent examples for you of conflicts that have appeared or presented themselves in your life?
Dude, I think every day we're faced with conflict, right? Like you and I come on and deliberate on what we're going to talk about today or scheduling guests, potentially conflict, right? Like what was it last week? We were talking about different guests and you're like, well, I don't really like this or that. And I'm like, well, I kind of do. Technically, that's a conflict.
Yeah.
So it's how we resolve it, right? And so that's part of, and I will tell you, I'm working on this, and I've got much better as I've gotten older. And that's one of my mantras I do in part of my morning routine is that I will look for joy and happiness in all the people I meet and the obstacles that come in my way, which are potentially all conflicts, right? I meet somebody that is rude. I meet somebody that doesn't take customer service to heart, and I'm at the growth, right? Like, so I'm literally practicing on how I'm going to handle conflict every day. But I think that's the biggest thing for me that I've improved on is, one, I'm open to it, right? When I was younger, like, it was my way or no way for sure. And, as we age, things change. But, yeah, I think life is conflict. And somehow we've done this disservice to think that you can just avoid it at all costs.
Sensei Jerrod with the wise words.
You know what I mean? But think about it. Like, tell me part of your day that isn't a conflict. First thing in the morning, the alarm goes off. You got the conflict internally. Do I get up and get after my day or do I sleep in?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You have internal conflicts and external conflicts. And I think people try to avoid both so much in their life. And that's where a lot of unhappiness comes from.
So why are conflicts so prevalent in our life, whether internal or external? And what does conflict in our lives achieve? Like, what do we have to gain out of going through conflict?
That's interesting. What do you have to gain? I think everything. I think about like if you don't have any conflict, where's the challenge? Where's the growth? Like you and I, one of the things that makes this podcast work is we have conflicting ideas all the time. We have conflicting beliefs. We have conflicting experiences. But if I wasn't interested in learning from your perspective, I would just put myself in the circle with people that have done exactly what I do and think exactly like I do. Because I'm avoiding any conflict. I'm avoiding that exchange. But I think even if you look at the science of Earth was made through what? Volcanic eruptions and continents crashing together and mountains of conflict. Like literally our world is built on conflict. So then the true measure is not how do you avoid conflict, but how do you handle conflict. And I think that's where we can do a great job as a society, is getting better at handling our conflicts. You know, you and I have talked about this before, and one of the things I was guilty of when I was younger, my truth was the truth. Whatever I thought about something was what I thought about, and whether it's based on my experience, my education, my learning, or just my ignorance. What I thought was right. And as you get older, I think one of joys about getting older is you realize, damn, I'm wrong a lot, and I don't know a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so just like you and I were talking off the air about, touchy subjects. Why don't people talk about race? Why don't we talk about racism? Why don't we talk about some of this stuff? Well, because we're afraid of what? The conflict that comes from it. Because we're still not really good at handling that. Or we're afraid of the conflict that arises that challenges our own beliefs.
So how do you think we can get better at that, at actually embracing conflict, knowing that as we go through and resolve conflicts, things will get better?
Well, I think, one, you have to believe it, right? Like, no conflict lasts forever. But I also think, like, look at your life, for example. Look at what you do. Okay, like, you just moved to Florida. It would have been easy for you to sit in your house and stay on Zoom calls on social media and only connect back to the people in Colorado because you already knew what they thought of you. You already knew what to expect in those relationships. But you got to take risks. You go to a new gym, you go to a new neighborhood, you create new relationships, which have the potential to bring conflict, right? Because there's new ideas. You have to assimilate to a new society. It's just like we talked about when you first moved there and you had your training incident with the triangle defense. That's conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But instead of you being pissed off that, like, well, why would they scold me like that? I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm never coming back. You actually reached down like, hey, here's what happened. Am I right or wrong? How do I handle this? Right? But it's conflict, but you didn't let your ego get in the way. You didn't let your emotions get in the way. You actually went to, okay, what do I do here? And I think that's how we get better. All conflict isn't a personal attack on you. And that's where I used to struggle when I was younger, is everything was personal.
Yeah.
So I think that's how you get better. It's like, okay, Ali, you think differently than me on this topic. Tell me why.
Yeah. There's a really good book that's called The Four Agreements. And I really can only remember one of them right now, but it's don't take things personally. And it's so profound because especially when it's a conflict or a heated argument, it's hard to not take things perfectly. And I have a perfect story that applies directly to this that just for today and yesterday kind of came up for me. So I have a friend of mine who I admire and respect, and he's also a fellow business owner. And a few months ago, about 3 months ago, I was getting ready to launch my coaching business, and I had told him, I launched a few testimonial groups just to get feedback. And he's like, oh, dude, like, I really want to do one of your groups. Like, can you please? And I was like, oh, well, I'm launching, blah, blah. He still wanted to be in the beta groups. And I was like, all right, man, like, I'll do one more for you, right? So I put a group together and we do a beta group. And by the end, everyone agrees to do a testimonial. And for whatever reason, he was kind of just delaying the testimonial. I'd be like, hey, man, like, whenever you can get me that testimonial, that'd be great. A month goes by and I'm like, all right, like, this is what we agreed to. If you could please get me that testimonial. 2 months go by. And then I'm starting to feel like he's a friend that I love, that I respect. And I'm starting to feel kind of like this, like, what the fuck? I'm taking it personally. And I'm like, this guy doesn't respect me. He doesn't respect my time, blah, blah, blah. And not really thinking of like, what could he possibly be going through or like whatever, right? I'm just taking it personally. So I had sent finally like one more like voice memo message and was like, hey man, like, I know it's been several weeks. I know life happens. I know this and that. Like, I'd really appreciate that testimonial. And then I didn't hear anything from him. And just the other day, I saw that he shared something on social media, and just like seeing his face, I felt these emotions of like, fuck him. Like, I don't want to like this post. Like, I should probably unfollow him. Like, I don't even need people like this in my life. And I heard myself and I was just like, whoa, like I'm taking this very personal, and I'm like kind of creating this conflict because of him not following through on something that he told me. So I share kind of how I'm feeling with Courtney, which was key. And I told her, I was like, like, these emotions and thoughts and feelings came up for me when I saw him post this, and I don't want to have those feelings towards him, like, he's my friend. I love this guy, but like they are, and as petty as I know it is, as much as I know it's from my lower self and my ego, these emotions are coming up, and I feel this conflict between it. Like, I want to love him like I did, but I feel like this like small bit of resentment towards him. And she said what I didn't want to hear. And she was like, well, I think you should let him know. I think you should, talk to him about it. I was like, oh man, I don't want to do that shit, especially for us as men, who most of us men express from that masculine side. We're not very good at really like being like, well, this is how I'm feeling sometimes, right? And expressing our feelings. But I actually did that today. And I sent him a voice memo and I was like, hey man, like, I just want to let you know, this is how I'm feeling. And I think it's because like, I do love you and care about you and love you, want to have a good friendship. And even though this is so petty and it's just for like this little testimonial video thing, like, I'm feeling this. And he called me like 5 minutes later and was like, man, I'm so sorry. Kind of shared some things that I had no idea what were going on with him. And even though they were pretty valid excuses, he's like, that's still not an excuse. And we were able to resolve that conflict. So the reason I'm sharing that is because you were just talking about how I reached out to you, right, when I had that triangle incident conflict. And for anyone who hasn't heard about that, the quick summary of that was I was at the new gym here in Florida where I'm training. It's not trials. And I stood up when someone kind of got a triangle on me, like kind of preparing to slam him, and kind of afterwards got scolded of like, hey, like, that's not allowed here. And kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I took it personally, which you're not supposed to do according to the 4 agreements. And I reached out to Jerrod about it. But I think such a big thing is when you do having that awareness of this is bothering me. I feel that there's a conflict, and reaching out to, again, always come back to that circle of 5 people who know you, people that you know, that you trust, that you respect, to get that second opinion can always be a very productive way to help resolve conflict. Because even sometimes, even people like myself or like some of our listeners who may know it's not a healthy, productive practice to take things personally, we're human beings. So sometimes we still do. And it's important to reach out to your trusted circle in order to get just a little bit more insight. Because sometimes you can't see when you're in the situation, you have that tunnel vision and you need to take yourself out of the box to really see the whole situation.
Yeah, just get somebody else's opinion. But I also think your friendship grows from having honest conversations. Right. If you just let that conflict sit in you and never share it, one, he's never aware of how you felt. And two, that relationship changes forever, not based on anything real, but based on what you're feeling, imaginary. Right? Like, it's not real. Like, you don't know that he intentionally did this. You don't know. Right? It's one of those, like, the kind of like the conversations we have in our head where we just, we're so nervous to do something, so we play up all these possible things that could go wrong. And then you actually do it, and you're like, well, none of that shit happened. But in your head, it all happened, right? Like, you're feeling slighted, you're feeling this, you're feeling that. And the reality is, a lot of that's not even true. It's just the dude got busy and forgot, or he had on his to-do list and never got to it. So by being able to talk about, like, one, checking your ego, and then two, being able to talk about it, man, you actually get more meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
Because now like, okay, if something's bothering me, I'm just going to go right to him. Or conversely, he knows, like, hey, if something's bothering me, I'm going to give Ollie a call. Or more importantly, if he's in a place where he needs a second opinion, who better to get a second opinion from than somebody that's honest with you?
Right.
But we don't know that. We don't know that you're going to be honest unless you're honest.
Yeah. And what a blessing a conflict can be for your relationship, right? Because like right after we had this call, we were both like, this feels so much better. And it strengthened that bond.
Sure.
And we see that with all types of different organizations that have placed conflicts in there for you to grow together, right? Whether that's military, fraternity, sorority, teams that go through tough practices, sports teams, all these things where you have to endure pain to really strengthen a bond.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, right? Because I just happened to see a headline in the paper the other day that the media was reporting there was a fight between a Denver Broncos lineman on offense and a defensive lineman. And like they're writing about all this fighting, and they don't realize like that conflict is actually good for that team. Right? Because like if I'm practicing against you every day and you're whooping my ass, and I just lay down, let you keep whooping my ass, you don't want me on your team. You want me to get pissed that you're beating my ass and to go lift extra weights and to study extra film and to come back the next day and look you in the eye and be like, Ollie, it's not happening today. I'm ready. Right? So that's technically conflict, but it's in a good way. Right? And we just have this aversion, and it's been over the last few years, the whole toxic masculinity thing and all this stuff where any conflict is to be avoided at all costs, and you can't say anything that might slightly be offended to anybody ever. And if any of your cartoon people did anything that might have been offensive 40 years ago, now your cartoons are canceled. Like, what are we trying to do there? We're trying to create this little world, this dystopian world where there is no conflict. And I'm no conflict expert, but I'm a human. I'm going to tell everybody this. You will never get away from humans having conflict. Ever. It's part of our nature. Right? And you don't want everybody to agree with you all the time. There's that saying I love out there, and that's it is, if you look at the people around you and they all agree with you all the time, there's no need for them because you already know all the answers. So I need conflict. They think about science is based on what? Conflict. You tell me that the earth is round. I'm a scientist. I go out to explore. Can the earth be any other way? I'm challenging your idea. Like everything we do is formulated on some form of conflict. So how do we get better at handling conflict? Instead of trying to avoid it, I think you're right on the money. First, I'll use you take feelings out of it. You take feelings out of it. And then two, one of the other ways I love to do it is I just have, if I'm feeling like, oh man, I'm under attack a little bit by the world, I just have to remember that saying, right? Life is happening for you, not to you. So if you and I disagree on something, Ollie, that's actually for me. Now my job is to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to be learning? Why do we disagree, and what am I learning from this?
What do you mean exactly by you take feelings out of it?
just like you said, take your ego out.
Mm,
Right? Like if I lead with ego, then everything that people don't agree with me wrong is a personal attack. If I lead with ego, everything that goes wrong in my day is a personal attack on my character. When the
right.
reality is, ego's good. Like you and I both have strong egos, or we wouldn't put ourselves out on this platform. We wouldn't have gotten in a cage to fight. But you also have to balance it with, dude, not everything's against you in the world. Not
Yeah.
everybody's out to get you in the world. And quite honestly, somebody that believes differently than you is probably there to teach you something. The world probably put them there to teach you,
For sure.
right? And I think if we could approach that, right, like if we could teach our kids to look at conflict as a question of, okay, what can I learn? Why are we different? What can I learn? Versus, oh, we're different. Why should I hate?
Mm-hmm.
We're,
Yeah.
we're different. Why are you against me? Dude, just because we're different, I'm not against you. And if you boil it down, humans all want the same thing. They want love.
Yep.
They want understanding. They want community.
Yep. The Dalai Lama says all humans are the same in this way. We all want more happiness, less suffering. That's all we want. And yeah, I think too, yeah, it's interesting. I had a little trouble completely like affirming the idea to take the emotions out of it. I like to look at it like this, of like trying to separate myself from my emotions and just observe them without identifying myself with the emotion of like, instead of me being like, I am angry, being like, anger is coming up within me. Why is that? And,
Sure.
and looking at that. And I want to tell the community too, is like, no matter what you're feeling, like, remember that your emotions are always valid. Like nobody can tell you the way that you're feeling is wrong, or, you shouldn't feel that way. And I think it's important to share those, like I did in this story, right? Like I was like, hey, I knew kind of like what I was feeling was coming from this place of ego and this small self, but I still wanted to share that and communicate that of like, hey, like I'm feeling this way and I don't want to feel this way. Like these emotions are coming up for me and I don't want them to come up for me. So what can we do about it, right? Of like almost presenting the emotions like they're separate from you, of like, hey, this is what came up. How can we kind of get rid of these, right? And then that honesty, that vulnerability is power. There's so much power that can come from just being like, you know what, here's the truth. This hurt my feelings. And starting from there and having an open and honest conversation and seeing where it goes.
Yeah, that's 100% right. I'm just looking at our questions over here and just something that catches my eye, man, is why is avoiding conflict at all costs such a bad idea? Like, and you go to schools nowadays and to damn near anywhere in society, and everything is like trying to avoid any form of conflict. And I think that's such a mistake to teach our kids to avoid conflict instead, just like you said, going head on into it. That doesn't mean I'm going out to fist fight all the time. But if you read my book, man, like I moved to a place where I didn't fit in 5th grade, and we had a game at recess that was called, basically Beat Me Up. I mean, that's what the kids played. And it wasn't, like, if I would avoid a conflict all the time, how many ass whoopings would I take before I was like, no, dude, this ain't happening.
Yeah.
Like instead of teaching people to avoid conflict, let's teach them how to stand up for themselves, how to have conversations about conflict and differing opinions and differing beliefs, and how that's actually really, really good for you. And you see it all the time. You see it in leadership classes. You see it in organizations, the micromanagement. Where does that come from? That's avoiding conflict, right? Like if I'm just going to tell you how to do it, so you're going to do it exactly my way, so then I don't have to deal with why you have different ideas. I don't have to deal with if something comes up short. Like if you look at a lot of things in life, it's all about avoiding conflict.
And that is a horrible idea, because if you're avoiding conflict at all costs, then the day you come across a conflict that is unavoidable, you will crumble.
Conflict builds strength, right? I think about it, when people look back on their life, they don't tell stories of grandeur about things that went easy and the smooth road. What do they talk about? The things they overcome, the challenges, the perseverance. That's all conflict handling. It's all dealing with adversity, not sitting back saying, woe is me, let me just wait for this to pass. And that's quite honestly one of the things that drives me crazy about today's society is we're weak. Right? The first sign of conflict, we look for how we're a victim, how we're offended, how this is against me. Instead of flipping it and going, okay, we have a difference here. Let's figure out, what am I going to learn from this? What am I supposed to be taught from this?
So how can we do that, Jerrod? Because when a conflict, I feel like, can go one of two ways. It's either going to really hurt a relationship and build feelings of resentment and negativity, or it can strengthen a relationship and have more respect and honesty for each other. So what do we need to do to make sure that we get positive results from conflicts?
Okay, I think first off, challenge your thought of what's a positive result. Does a positive result mean you and I stay friends forever and everything's rosy? Or as a positive result, I realize I can't count on you in a moment of truth and that you're not up to that level, so our friendship separates. Right? To me, both those are good. Right? Like, and that may sound harsh and it may sound rude, but conflict, right? Like, if I go to war with you and you and I are best friends all the way up through all our training and everything, and then all of a sudden we get to the field and the first time shots are being fired, you run away and hide and leave me out there. Conflict exposed that we're different, that I can't count on you. So that's still a good outcome, right? Like, I've seen that I don't want to put my life in your hands. Right? Like sometimes we have, it's just like when I was teaching training officers in police work, and they were like, oh, well, the only positive outcome is when everybody passes your programs. And I'm like, no, that's not the only positive outcome. That's a good outcome. But another great outcome is when you identify people that shouldn't be police officers and they don't pass because you caught it. You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes we think that a conflict, the only positive outcome is when everybody's super happy, and that's not the truth. Business. What's the best negotiation outcome? When neither party's happy. Right? Because it means you didn't get all that you wanted, I didn't get all that I wanted, we found middle ground. Best outcome for business. Neither of us are truly 100% happy, but we're still doing business because we found middle ground. So I think we got to challenge that novel idea that the outcome of all conflict is roses and rainbows. Sometimes it's not. But if I avoid it, or I negotiate business-wise with you, and it's either 100% me and 0 you, well, how many good relationships come out of that on the back end? Probably none, right? You walk away, you're like, dude, I'm not doing 100-0. You're out of your mind. Or 80-20. And so I think that's the opposite of handling conflict should teach you resiliency. It should teach you communication. It should teach you perseverance. The object of conflict isn't to always get your way and to come out 100% on your side. You look at fighting. Fighting is one of the most basic forms of conflict. At practice, people are like, you need the conflict from everybody else to make you better. If you go to practice and everybody lets you be the best and let you win all the time, they didn't make you better. And sometimes you hate it. Sometimes when the coach says, hey, you're going to go 16 straight minutes, and you're pissed off and you're mad as fuck. But at the end of it, you find like, ooh, dude, I just did that. My fight is barely over half of what I just did. That conflict did what?
Strengthened you.
Built confidence. You know what I mean? So we got to realize that like conflict is good for us if we know how to handle it and we're honest towards it.
I like it. So how can we break down for the OPP community kind of a formula to think of when we're faced with conflict?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the first thing I love to do is that little quote, right? If I feel that conflict coming or I got to have a conversation I know is a little challenging, I just think, okay, life is happening for me, not to me, for me. So that means, okay, Ali and I have to have a difficult conversation about something that's for me to grow. Maybe it's for me to understand your perspective. Maybe it's for me to tell you my views and help you grow. Right? So I think the first thing is accept that conflict is there for you and you're supposed to learn. Learn the validity of relationships, learn people that maybe shouldn't be in your circle anymore, maybe people that should be, maybe challenging your thoughts that you've had your whole life. So I think that's the first thing for me is you frame this obstacle, this conflict, this challenge is happening for me. It's designed for me to grow. Because then you open your mind to, okay, what is the intent here? Instead of saying life's happening to me, then you feel like the victim, now you're on the defense. That's the first thing for me. What do you think?
I think so too. Having that framework, having that lens. If you guys haven't listened to the Pro-Noia episode, go listen to that. And there's many great minds of the world that say, I think it's Henry Ford who says those who believe they can or think they can't are both right, right? So if you think this conflict is going to ruin your life or you think it's going to make you better, whatever you think, you're right. So yeah, definitely the framework and the mindset is the first step.
And then I agree with you. And the second is, check your ego and ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Be okay with all the feelings. I think that's where we as men definitely struggle, is we don't want to admit we're feeling sad or you hurt my feelings. Everything's always all right. And I think, just like you said in your example, friendships go deeper when I can call you and be like, Ollie, you kind of hurt me on this one. Or, or Jerrod, hey, you dropped the ball on that. What happened there? Right? Because now I know we're in honest mode.
Right. Right. So I think that's like validating first, right? Validating the feelings of like, okay, I was feeling a little angry. Anger came up within me. Sadness came up within me. And remember that like, it's okay to experience emotion. Sometimes we can't even control them. They just come up. We are not our emotions. So validating those emotions are coming up and then separating them from you of like, okay, I am not my anger. I am not my sadness. I am not my jealousy. These are just emotions that are coming up. And when you make that separation, you're much more able to assess them in a logical way than in an emotional way. Because if you're assessing while angry or assessing while sad, it's all skewed. It's not going to be a very accurate assessment. So validating and separating emotions.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. That was very well said. And I think the other way we get better is by practicing handling them. So letting your kids handle conflicts. If you're a leader, letting your subordinates problem solve and handle conflicts at the lowest level. Don't be always trying to come in with the answer. We've talked about this before, and nobody loses in sports for a lot of sports, or soccer, baseball, whatever. They don't keep score anymore. Well, that's not teaching kids how to handle losing, which is a form of conflict. So let your kids lose, let them struggle, and then encourage them to come up with solutions and ideas and explain to you why does losing suck. Like, let them explain to you how they're feeling when they lose. Because I don't want to raise a culture of people that like losing. But I also understand that losing is a part of life, and how you handle it determines where you go.
Yeah.
So you got to practice it, right? You got to practice handling conflict. And the only way to do that is to do it. Not avoid it at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah. Put yourself in positions where you have to resolve conflicts, you have to solve problems, you have to do hard things. And then I think another one there is share, talk about it with somebody that you trust, someone that you love, that loves you. Because again, when you're in the midst of conflict, sometimes it's easier said than done to really separate and validate those emotions, right? Or validate and separate those emotions. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm good, right? We have a whole episode on that. I'm good.
Yeah.
But sometimes we're not.
Yeah. Now this might be delicate, but I would challenge this. Share it with people that are close to you, that have earned the right to see your vulnerable side. Right? We have this misconception that vulnerability is good. And I agree, being vulnerable is good. It breaks down the armor a little bit. It lets you let some stuff out. But blind vulnerability to people who haven't earned your trust is dangerous. Makes sense?
Really? Why do you think so?
Because you get all kinds of opinions. You get all kinds of people that tell you shouldn't feel that way and you're wrong for feeling that way. So my whole point there is, like, if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm going to talk to somebody I trust, somebody that I know's got experience or can listen. I don't like to just put it on social media, right? Because then you're open to so many different things. And a lot of times for many people, it makes them feel worse because they get told all the reasons why they shouldn't be feeling that way. And it goes back to what you said earlier. Like, you can't tell me how to feel. Like, I feel the way I feel. If you're a good friend, you're going to help me through this feel. But I think where we make a mistake is we throw it out to so many people who haven't earned the right to have our vulnerability on their plates, right? Like, I don't think the whole world wants to see vulnerable Jerrod. There's certain people in my circle that get to see that because I know they're going to help me through things. So we got to be careful with that, right? Like, if we're going to talk to people, make sure they're people that have earned your trust and earned your respect, and that are going to help guide you through it, not add on to it. And that's what I see a lot on social media, right? Somebody going through a divorce, somebody's going through a tough time, they post all this stuff. Then you look at the comments, and like at least half the comments are telling people why they shouldn't feel that way. And then they got all these arguments, and you're like, dude, that didn't help at all.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think that is something we could do a whole nother episode on vulnerability and the fact that people have to earn your vulnerability.
Yeah.
You just don't blindly throw that around.
Yeah. I think that'll have to be its own episode because
especially because there's so much. It's such a popular word, right? Brene Brown's doing a great job teaching the value of vulnerability, but even she talks about it in her books. That vulnerability is not for everybody in the world all the time. Especially while you're working through it. But now, even you just said it, and I know you disagree with me sometimes, but even you just said it. Before this show, you talked about something that happened today. But you're like, I'm going to have to process through it and get through it before I share it.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because you're not ready to be vulnerable on that topic, right? Like, and I guess that's my whole point, is once I get through it,
right,
then I can share it with everybody because I'm no longer dealing with this in my past. But while I'm in the midst of it, I'm not going to throw it out to the world and get everybody's input. I'm going to go to my guys. My wife. I'm going to go to the people, right? And then once I'm through, I'm like, oh, okay, 5th grade Jerrod, they were playing beat up Jerrod at recess every day. When I was in 5th grade, I wouldn't tell nobody that. I was embarrassed. I was upset. Like, why are they picking on me? Why am I so different? Why do I have to move here? Why can't I beat up some of these kids? Okay, finally, I got somebody to beat up. I'm going to beat this guy up. You know what I mean? Like, when you're in it, you got to work through it.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with that.
And I think you're right. It's dangerous. It is dangerous, but I also think the sooner you can be more open about it, the more you'll grow. Like the sooner you can experience danger. It's kind of like you know, if you go into an MMA fight without ample training, you might get your ass kicked. You're probably going to get your ass kicked, but that's going to be a hell of a growth experience. You don't necessarily want to do that, right? You want to train, AKA open up with your people, but the sooner you can actually compete and get yourself in a little danger, you're going to grow.
The sooner you do it in life, the sooner your
Yep.
kids understand how to handle conflict and problem solve and resolve things, the more skills they're going to have. Because that handling conflict resolution, it's a skill.
Yeah.
And you only get it by, like every other skill, practicing it.
Yeah. Man, this was great. So how to handle conflict, guys. Reset your framework, right? Don't be paranoid. Hey, another conflict. Woohoo, this is happening for me. I got a lesson here. I'm going to grow. Boom, you feel those emotions come up, validate them. Okay, I see you, anger. Okay, I see you, sadness. Separate them. I am not my anger. I am not my sadness. Why are those coming up? Practice, right? Do hard things, practice resolving conflicts, and share with your trusted circle, with people that you can share with, and potentially with whoever the conflict is with, if it applies there. What else you got for him, Jerrod?
I love it, man. I'm super excited that we just announced our men's Living with Purpose retreat November 4th through 7th down in Florida. And guys, you know, one of the things we're talking about right now is fear hiding the real you from you. And our men out there, are we afraid of living a life of happiness and purpose because we won't take some risks? We won't step into who we're supposed to be. And, you know, we talked about on Courtney's episode, her power is to touch people and let them believe in who they could be. You know, one of the things I hope to get out of this, and that we're going to lead our men through to join us, is no longer shine away from our gifts and no longer shine away from who we're supposed to be, but really stepping into it and seeing that when we do that, the world steps with us. So I'm super excited to come down to Florida in November, Ali, hang out with you and Courtney, and lead this small group of men to a more purposeful life.
Me too. I cannot wait. So apply now, guys. It is application only. We'll be reviewing applications to determine whether or not it'll be a good fit for this men's retreat. 3 days, going to be very jam-packed with a lot of very applicable modules to our life. Fear is just one of them. So I can't wait to spend the weekend with you guys.
And ladies, don't feel left out. We just thought we're going to have more coming up, but we wanted to go after our men on this first one and really empower them to step into the life they're supposed to be leading. And I want to thank all of you guys over the last few episodes. Our subscriptions are increasing. Our newsletters are increasing. Our Patreon groups are increasing. So please continue to support, love, and share the program, because without you guys, it's just two dudes sharing ideas on Zoom calls right now.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Love it. Patreon taking off. So head on over there if you haven't already, and head on over to the retreat application page as well.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.